Okay. Good morning, Rob. Great to be here.
Also the Hall of Famer, Matt Miller. Good morning, Matthew.
Good morning.
Good to have you both with us on this Tuesday. Mr. Bodwell is out today, so Bill filling in for him.
So going second and third team.
Yeah. Your words, not mine, Admiral.
Yeah. I feel second or third team.
Nonsense.
John does a good job. So.
Bill, also former Berkeley County Commission president. And in that Parks and Rec segment there with Joe, you hear greatly how the needs have expanded with Parks and Rec, looking for another $800,000 in the budget this year. That will not be easy to come by.
Yeah, and I appreciated Joe's frankness, his honesty. He's very sincere. I think he's doing a great job. And Brad, I did get your note about Stonebridge, and it is utilized. I've utilized it in past for launching canoes and kayaks. That's a wonderful place to access the Opequon River, but it still is not utilized like some of the other parks. So my point is still true. If we cannot do anything, got to be very selective what we can do. But that's not my decision. And fortunately, someone like Joe Burton's, he and others will make those decisions. But hopefully they'll get the money because we need all the Parks and Rec for this growing county.
Our next guest is Jay Paterno, son of Penn State legendary coach Joe Paterno, member of the Penn State Board of Trustees and author of Blitzed, the all-out pressure of college football's new era. He is pushing back against the Trump administration's recent decisions around Title IX, NIL, and collegiate sports. Jay Paterno, good morning. Thank you for joining us on the phone this morning.
Good to be on, guys.
You will not remember this, of course, but I do. So, in 2000,
hey, look, anytime there's a Paterno West Virginia thing in there, I know there's some bad blood that goes back to WVU way. So no, I'm a little nervous.
This is not that at all. No, this is all good. I promise you. 2010, I attended as a football coach a Penn State coaching clinic. And got a chance to spend the whole weekend up there at Happy Valley, which was a wonderful experience, by the way, and attended your clinic with quarterbacks. You were the quarterback coach at the time.
Yep.
And went through, I think, about a half an hour of the session of the workouts you put your quarterbacks through. And I think Matt McGloin at that time was one of your quarterbacks who ended up playing in the NFL. You had a few of those that made it to the NFL over your time there, Jay.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt was, you're going back a few years. But,
oh, yeah.
But I'm glad we did a good job for you.
Yeah, appreciated it too. It was fun watching that as a coach who's not at the collegiate level. You're always wondering what are they teaching up at that level that we're not doing at the high school level or whatever. And also, before we get to the main part of the thing here, Jared Odrick was a senior at that point, and we were inside the indoor practice facility. We got a chance to see Jared Odrick run in 40s. As he was getting ready to be a number one draft choice of the Miami Dolphins. 6'5", 298. That guy should not be able to run that fast, I remember thinking, as he was doing those 40s.
Well, we had a kid around that time named Steve Roach, I think, was from down your way, right?
Yeah, Martinsburg offensive lineman. Yep. That's correct. Absolutely.
Yep, absolutely.
Jay, let's talk about the football. All college sports have changed significantly since I attended your clinic in 2010. Title IX. Women's sports with NIL is going to be interesting to see how that money is distributed. Can you take us through that a little bit and what your complaint is in regards to how you think this is going to be handled?
Well, I think here's the thing. I think we're talking about there's a convergence of a bunch of things happening right now. You have that NIL's been kind of the not really the rule of the land, but it's been what's going on has been kind of the wild, wild west. So there really have been very few rules, and there's no national set of rules really govern it. So that's been one thing. And now we're about to get revenue sharing. And one of the things with revenue sharing in the settlement that's coming. Schools are going to get to be able to distribute $20.5 million to their sports, based on television revenues that come in. For example, the Big Ten gets a check every year for TV rights for about $1.1 billion. Now, pretty much all of our sports appear on TV, so we're utilizing all of our athletes' name, image, and likeness for these broadcasts. But what schools are doing now is they're going to say, okay, 80% of that money is going to go to football, another 10% is going to go to men's basketball, 5% to women's basketball, and then 5% to all your other sports. And when you look at all your other sports, Penn State's men's hockey team was just on TV, ESPN2 twice in a row, and they've been on the Big Ten Network to make the Frozen Four. You got the women's volleyball team has been on national television broadcasts and won the national championship. All these other sports, their athletes are being used to create content and create revenue for these networks, but very few of them are going to see any of that money. So I think there's got to be a more equitable distribution of that revenue sharing money. The NIL stuff, there's really two types of NIL. There's a company, for example, like State Farm, that thinks this athlete in college can be in the commercial and they'll get a return on their investment by paying them for their name, image, and likeness and endorsement. And then you just have schools that are putting together piles of money, essentially paying people to play for them, which is not really NIL. It's really pay to play.
There are two separate money supplies. So the $25 million or so that the college will be distributed is still always going to be separate from what the players can generate on their own, correct?
Yes, that's true. And I think that, you're trying to level the playing field, everybody. But the thing is, once this settlement takes place on the 7th of April, there's going to be another lawsuit. It's going to be a Title IX lawsuit. There's going to be a lawsuit for what if if I'm the next Arch Manning coming out, the next big recruit that comes out and says, what if I don't want to be subject to that settlement? I wasn't part of that class action suit. I want to make my own deal with the school, and I think I should be able to make more money. So college athletics is going to need antitrust protection from the federal government. They're going to need that. They're going to need collective bargaining. They're going to need a lot of things, the NFL. Because, look, we have to be honest about who we are at this point. We're running sports entertainment franchises on our campuses. There's just no other way to say it because of the money that's involved. And I say that as an old school guy. I say that as a guy who loved the amateur model, but I'm also a realist in what we are.
And how do women's sports figure into this financially?
Well, right now it doesn't look like a whole lot as it relates to the revenue sharing. And I think that's part of why there's going to be lawsuits involved. Our women's volleyball team, they'll fly out to Nebraska on a Wednesday to play a Wednesday night game, and they're doing it on a Wednesday night simply because of television, because the Big Ten Network needs 2 hours of live entertainment. And for them not to be kind of get some of the revenue sharing money seems a little counterintuitive, especially when you look at a sport like that, the women's volleyball team last year in the national finals and the national semifinals had television audiences of 1.2 and 1.3 million viewers, which was higher than 5 of our Penn State football broadcasts. So this is no longer an outlier. And it's really an interesting time. And we're going to need to find a lot of different revenue sources because even at a school like Penn State, we're on an annual basis right about the break-even point coming into this year. And when you now say you got to find $20.5 million of revenue sharing, where's that coming from?
What kind of effect will this have on schools like West Virginia, for instance, which is a major Division I school, but doesn't have anywhere near the revenue base that the Big Ten provides and that the Penn State alumni provide?
Oh, I think it's going to put a tremendous amount of pressure on them. I mean, there's going to have to be some decisions made in terms of, do we keep all the sports we have? What about our staffing levels? I mean, if you look at a lot of football programs right now, if you go back 10, 12 years ago, there were about 33 employees with the football program between coaches, trainers, all that kind of stuff. A lot of schools now are 85, 90 employees because they have social media people. They have a whole scouting department, and now schools are hiring GMs and paying them $700,000 to $1 million. You got head football coaches making $11.5 million, and what other business model in America would have one person making over 10% of total revenues, not profits? 10% of total revenues go to one person. And, that's just where we're at. And we got to find schools like West Virginia have to be very, very strategic as to how they spend their money.
Bill?
Yeah, good morning, Jay. Thanks for joining us. A lot of the revenue for college sports comes from football. Revenue sharing, though, is that limited to just football schools, or does everybody get the $20.5 million? I'm thinking Pacific, like schools such as Villanova, high in basketball, but nothing in football. Do they get the 20.5?
Right. No, they won't hit that, but they'll have to opt in and put up money for their other sports. Football is going to be the one that eats the most, but they will have to opt into one of the things that happened as part of the settlement is there is a settlement going back to 2016. As part of the settlement was athletes going back to 2016 are going to be paid for the use of their name, image, and likeness. So that schools like Villanova got to put money aside. You're talking about $10 million a year on top of the 20.5 right now is what they're talking. So a school like Villanova will have to come up with money to pay former athletes who played for them from 2016 through now. That said, a number of athletes at the University of Michigan who were pre-2016 have already announced a lawsuit against Michigan looking for, hey, why are you cutting us off at 2016? Where's our money? So, I mean, it's the minute one lawsuit is done, the next one is coming. And the only people that are really happy about all this and are really making money are the attorneys. And no disrespect to attorneys, but they don't work pro bono on these cases.
Now, what is the April 7th settlement you referred to?
Well, there's a lawsuit called House. One of the plaintiffs' last name was House versus the NCAA. And this is the one that's kind of triggered all this stuff. So to settle the lawsuit of former athletes demanding reimbursement for their use of name, image, and likeness, and as I mentioned, from 2016 through now, as well as setting up a model for the future. That's going to be, they could have gone through a whole case. The NCAA and the lawyers negotiated a settlement, and it's been elusive, but the judge has basically said on April 7th that they're going to announce a settlement. And, once that settlement's done, there is no question there will be more lawsuits filed.
Matt Miller.
At some point, though, you can't go all the way back. I mean, there has to be a situation where you say, look, this is where it starts, and what the reasonings will be behind it, I don't know. But, Jay, you mentioned earlier the terminology, it's the wild, wild west. Who's the sheriff? I mean, who's kind of overseeing all of this or trying to bring this to a positive resolution?
No one. I mean, quite frankly, no one. The NCAA has lost every lawsuit on this for a while, so they're a little gun shy. They're counting on federal legislation. Anybody that's watched anything in Washington, D.C. knows getting Congress to agree on anything is not easy. And this probably was not high on their priority list given some of their challenges that we're facing. And rightfully so. I mean, if you're sitting here saying, well, we've got to jump college athletics to head of the line over other things that are impacting this country, certainly I wouldn't advocate that. But the idea that Congress, I mean, till the NCAA, until college athletics gets either antitrust protection or a definitive legal, some protections legally, it's going to be tough for this ever to settle down. And everyone's a little bit afraid of it. Really, you need the conferences can't seem to. The Big Ten wants to grab as much money as they can. The SEC wants to grab as much money as they can. They don't really care what happens to the Big 12. They don't really care what happens to the ACC because it's all about trying to get as much advantage for your schools as you can. What you really need is somebody with the intestinal fortitude and the courage to say, you know what, these four conferences need to get together and make this equitable so that schools like West Virginia or Texas Tech have the same ability and same kind of budgetary processes and access to funds to be on a level playing field. But the problem is we have a generation of coaches and leadership in the college athletics that, contrary to the years when Don Nail and Joe Paterno and Tom Osborne and people like that wanted a level playing field, and they were all confident they could win on a level playing field. You have a couple conference commissioners as well as coaches that want to have every advantage they can rather than compete on a level playing field. Until we get that, it's going to be really, really tough to get one person to say this is how it ends.
Now, how does Title IX fit into all this, Jay?
Well, it depends on who's in the White House, really. I mean, a year ago when this was coming up, the Biden administration said that, that revenue sharing would be subject to Title IX, which meant that the revenue sharing of the $20.5 million would have to be distributed based on participation. So if you were 50% female athletes and 50% male athletes, 10.25 would have to go towards women's athletics, and 10.25. And if you were 60% men, and I'm not going to get into all the math because it's too early for all that, but you get the point. Whereas just in the last month, the Trump administration has basically said Title IX will not be enforced on the revenue sharing money. So this could ping pong back and forth every 4 years potentially. So even that's not settled. That's why I think you're going to see lawsuits on it as it relates to that.
Jay Paterno is our guest here on the program. He is the author of Blitz, the all-out pressure of college football's new era. And Jay, my producer here, Colin McLaughlin, who's our sports director as well, asked me to ask you the question. We saw St. Francis recently drop out of Division I for football and down to Division III where they used to be. Do you anticipate seeing that happening more now with those small Division I football schools?
Oh, I don't think there's any question. You're going to see some schools have to drop down because to opt in to playing Division I basketball, you're going to have to opt into this $10 million a year settlement to pay NIL going backwards. And it's kind of, to me, it's pretty short-sighted for the NCAA to make a school like St. Francis opt into something like that so that someone like Zion Williamson from Duke can get a check for his NIL use. Going back a few years or whatever it may be. So I think it's short-sighted in that regard. Even when you look at like the Atlantic 10, which is at a higher level than St. Francis, schools like VCU and schools like St. Bonaventure and schools like that have to opt in and come up with that money, and that's not going to be easy for them to do either. So I think you're definitely going to see more of that happening.
When does the day happen when we look at the way college athletics is running right now, which is essentially, as you said, the Wild West, and you get the professional treatment of these rosters that the NFL has? For instance, you can't tamper in the NFL. In college football, tampering happens every day. Your second-string defensive end this year is headed to another team in the conference or another conference, and he just got a check for $1 million to make the jump, and he didn't even start last year. This is routinely happening in college football right now. Why is it not illegal to tamper at college, but it is in the pros?
Well, because of collective bargaining, because the players have all signed on to that agreement in the NFL, and the NFL has an antitrust exemption, and that's why realistically that's what's going to take on the college level. It's going to take a collective bargaining agreement and the ability to enforce that collective bargaining among college athletes. And look, the reality is student athletes are demanding a lot of things. They want the ability to transfer. They want the ability to make money off their name and likeness. They want all these things for them. When there's very little respect as it relates to what the universities are putting into these college athletes. They're getting coaching, they're getting nutrition, they're getting all kinds of instruction. A lot of athletes, quite frankly, in college football and basketball are getting into schools academically they would never get into based on their transcripts and their academic records. So the schools are investing a lot of money and resources into the athletes, but the athletes want the ability to do whatever they want, whenever they want. So I think until we have a recognition that this is a two-way street, then I think it's going to be really chaotic. And just like you said, the backup quarterback at one school can be the starter at another one, and they're going to get paid for it. And that creates a lot of instability and chaos. And I think it's not for the good for the game, because as a fan, the guy that you've been waiting to see start next year all of a sudden says, I can't wait another year, I'm gone. And, they're doing it. Penn State's backup quarterback left right before the playoffs started this year. And had, Drew Allar got hurt in one of those games, they would have been playing with a freshman, and the coaching staff had gone to the playoff thinking, we've got this really good backup quarterback. Now he's gone. So yeah, there has to be a point where we get to that.
Matt was right.
Well, I just wanted to add in. I'm thinking a lot of the same thing as you're talking about, Jay. A lot of these athletes, I'm not sure look at or realize how much better they have it than student athletes over the last 20, 25, 30 years when it comes to facilities, training, all of the other elements, that a lot of TV revenue, I'm sure, has gone into these indoor practice facilities and these just elaborate weight rooms and the dining facilities and locker rooms and all of those things. There's an element that I guess for many athletes it's just expected, so to speak. But there's a lot that goes into that as well that has to be considered. My question to you would be: at what point do we see coaches have to approach players almost on a contractual basis, like in the pros? I can't have half my team or more going into the transfer portal every year. So can you approach a student athlete? Hey, I want you to sign that you're going to be here at least 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're starting to see is some coaches that are saying, look, we can give you, I'll just take a round number because the math is easier, $100,000. We're going to give you an NIL money. And, a lot of these are way more than that, but I'm just using that as an easy number. Okay, in year one, we'll give you $15,000. In year two, we'll give you $20,000. Year three, you'll get this amount. So they can escalate it if they want, which I think is probably what you're going to see to try and get guys to stay put. But I think that's going to be the challenge. And one of the things I think that's going to be unique is the challenge for a coach now is everybody says, go buy yourself a great team. Go get this guy, go get that guy, get all these guys. And anybody can build a roster by throwing money around. The question is in team sports like football, like volleyball, like basketball, like hockey, whatever it may be. You can build a roster, but the teams that are going to succeed and get down the stretch and win it all are the ones that build a team, not a roster of talent. And when you look at, I just came back from the regionals where Penn State's ice hockey team made the Frozen Four, and they're the last Big Ten team standing. They don't have the biggest NIL budget. And there are schools like Minnesota and Michigan and Michigan State. They went out and got some really big name kids that have been drafted in the top 10 in the first round of the NHL. And they're not playing anymore. But what has happened here is they built a really, really cohesive team that really works well together. And you look at, despite all the talk about Ohio State's money pool, they had a really cohesive team that when that Michigan loss happened, they got together and said, you know what, enough's enough. You look at Notre Dame. Notre Dame wasn't spending more than everybody else in NIL, but they had a really cohesive team unit that went and got all the way to the finals. So I think that's a challenge for coaches. How do I build a team?
Jay, your cell's starting to fade a little bit. I'm not sure if you were moving around or not, but yeah, you started to kind of fade out there. Bill, you got one more question for Jay, and then you let him go?
Yeah, Jay, we tend to use revenue sharing and name, image, likeness interchangeably. There are distinct differences. Are they managed the same at the local level / at the university level, the conference level, at the national level? The second thing, or can revenue sharing be individual payouts, or is that strictly name recognition and likeness?
About a minute and a half, Jay.
Well, yeah, the revenue sharing can be individual. So I can pay the quarterback $500,000, and I could pay the long snapper $50,000 if I want to. That can all be individual. And what's happening with a lot of the NIL stuff is now schools are going to be able to bring it in-house. So now if Pepsi gives Penn State $3 million a year for athletics, they can use that and put players on Pepsi cups, whatever. But it comes down to this, and I'll leave you with this. There was a woman went to a confession for a Catholic priest, and she said, "Forgive me, Father, for I've sinned. I did something I shouldn't have for $100,000." Okay? And the priest says to her, "Well, would you have done it for $10,000? And she says, "Well, what kind of person do you think I am?" And the priest says, "We've already established what kind of person you are. We're just seeing, where your price range is and how flexible your morals are based on money." That's where college athletics is right now.
Jay, thank you so much for your time this morning. Appreciate the conversation. Good stuff.
Thanust, Jay.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
Jay Paterno, and again, that book is entitled Blitzed, the All-Out Pressure of College Football's New Era. Jay formerly coached at Penn State. It would be, I think, very difficult to be a college coach under these rules as they currently are in place, Matt and Bill. And I know these coaches get a lot of money, but you're sure in it now because you're not just recruiting out of high school, you're recruiting constantly out of college, too.
And we're seeing a couple of big-name coaches giving it up. Yeah. Tony Bennett, for example, in Virginia.
Yeah, had enough, right? Maryland's coach moved on, and all of his players seem to be, too. They've, well, hold on a second. We're at the top of the hour here. I'm ready to get you out of the 10 o'clock for a moment there.